Next Book, where teachers come to discover their next great classroom read. Brought to you by Plains Literacy Council, a division of the Alabama Literacy Association.
Hello. Welcome to the March episode of Next Book. I'm Kristen.
I'm Michelle.
And we are so excited to talk to you all this month. This past weekend, Michelle and I had the opportunity to join the Plains Literacy Council's Winter Writing Workshop. And it was a Saturday morning filled with book talks, author talks, all great things, right?
Yeah, it was so much fun.
I really enjoyed it. You know, Saturdays, it's a hard sell. A Saturday morning is a hard sell, especially right now with everything happening. But I would say it was 4-5 hours very well spent. And I mean, it was great.
Absolutely. And Kristen, you are a language arts background just like me. Were you ever big into science?
So science was always tricky for me in the classroom because we just spend all of our time reading novels. And a lot of our novels, I feel like, are historical fiction novels. And then, you know, you throw a Shakespeare play in there, and then that's all we have time for. And I felt like the only kind of science reading we did was nonfiction, like articles of the week. Like pretty much that's all we did.
Yes. Well, and so that's what was really neat about one of our guest authors. Jennifer Swanson is a STEM writer, and she writes nonfiction books that are so much more engaging than articles of the week and things like that. Some of them are pretty short and consumable pretty quickly. Some of them are on the longer side. They span a wide range of ages, and so it's just, I was blown away by how accessible she made science feel.
Yeah, she did. And in her talk, one of the big things was leading with curiosity and asking or getting students to figure out what their question is. Like, what are you interested in learning about? And I felt like she gave our teachers that were there with us just all these amazing little ideas and tidbits on how to incorporate more science and STEAM reading and writing in the classroom. So I truly enjoyed hearing her talk. And I have not had the chance to read Beastly Bionics yet, but that was the book that she brought for all of our teachers. But Michelle, you've read it.
I read it, and it was really neat. It's all about how science is inspired by nature. So if we think about, like why something has scales, for example, it has to do with protection. And so she goes through and makes connections for you, with you, from like an animal, something that naturally occurs in nature, to how that can be turned into some robotics to help our environment, to help humans, to help make the earth better for us all.
All right, so we've talked about how much fun we had with Jennifer, but let's dive right in with the conversation that we had with Jennifer from this past weekend. I was not able to be part of the conversation, but Michelle, who did you get a chance to talk to Jennifer with?
So I got to talk to Jennifer with none other than Wes Gordon.
So Wes makes a guest appearance this week, and I would suffice to say, did he enjoy himself?
He did.
Yeah.
He asked questions.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm excited to hear. All right, here we go.
Jennifer Swanson is the award-winning author of over 40 nonfiction books for children, mostly about science and technology. Jennifer's love of STEM began when she started a science club in her garage at the age of 7. While no longer working from her garage, Jennifer's passion for science and technology resonates in all her books. Her books have received many accolades, including the Parents' Choice Gold Award, Green Earth Book Honor Award, a Florida Book Award, AAAS Subaru SB&F Prize for Excellence in Science nomination, multiple California Reading Association Awards, and the National Science Teaching Best STEM Awards. She's also an accomplished speaker. She's been to several conferences, including our own, and she encourages kids of all ages to engage their curiosity and discover the science all around them.
Jennifer, I love when I got to your website and it says Science Rocks. It's big, it's exciting, it's bold. And science is intimidating for people. It's easy for people to shy away from. I was definitely one that shied away from science. What is it about science that draws you in?
For me, science is everywhere. All you have to do is look around and you see it. And I've been seeing it like that since I was 7, and I started a science club in my garage. And for me, I guess I can't imagine a world without science. So what I try to do is get people to see that it's there and then get as excited about it as I am. That's kind of my goal.
Yeah, we're really good at it. We really enjoyed your books.
Well, thank you.
Starting in probably 5th grade and up, teachers tend to think of the content areas in silos. So there's the math silo,
Yep.
and the ELA silo, and the social studies silo, and the science silo. And unfortunately, teachers can lean that way too. Part of what I like about the way you present is you are presenting science in a very accessible way to all of the content areas. What is that message that kids and teachers need to hear about the accessibility of science?
I think you need to make a connection with it. And we talked a little bit about this, how if you can just find an entry point, you can get people excited about science, even if they don't think they like it. Just make a connection. Like for kids, a great one is ask them about their pet, right? Mm-hmm. Like, tell me about your pet. Tell them, does your fish do this? Can your dog do tricks? And then talk about, well, how did your dog do that? Was it trained? What does it look like? What does your friend's dog look like? And then come back and pin it all together and you go, that's science, right? Mm-hmm. Like science, genetics is what makes dogs look differently and all this kind of thing. So you kind of do the science without them really knowing you're doing the science. You just make the cool connection in the beginning and then you take it from there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that, I have the benefit of having heard a presentation from Jennifer before we did this podcast, and somebody asked a great question that I'm going to repeat here. Shout out to Emily Jennings, our outstanding reading teacher of the year. She asked, how do you promote curiosity when there's a lack of background knowledge? And I think the connections is where you start with that. But it leads into the question that my good friend who couldn't be here also does. She's our project lead the way teacher at our school. And when we have someone that's decided, I'm not good at science, I don't like science, how do we as teachers and parents help them discover that interest and build that confidence? How do we get that curiosity? And I do think a lot of it comes from that lack of background knowledge.
Yeah, I think people do think science, when they think of science, they think textbooks, they think tests, they think, oh my gosh, there has to be a right answer. And that's not true. And if you're a scientist, you understand, or an engineer, you understand there aren't a whole lot of absolutes. There's theories, there's ideas. But how you come about that is asking questions. So I think if you have someone who is afraid of science or, doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge, again, start with something they know. Like everybody has a cell phone or maybe knows what a cell phone is. Okay. So ask them, what does your cell phone do? How do you think it does that? How does your GPS work? It actually talks to a satellite that is way up in space, right? And if you present it that way and tie it to something that they use in their everyday things, then they're like, oh, I never thought about that. And as soon as you get them to say that, you jump on that and you take their curiosity to the next level.
Several years ago, the national, I don't remember who it was, new science standards were presented. And next generation science
NGSS,
standards.
yeah.
Yes, NGSS. Thank you for that.
Sure.
I know a little bit about what I'm talking about, but just a little bit. But one of the ideas in the next generation science standards is that of cross-cutting concepts.
Yep.
And that there are some concepts that cut across not only subject areas in science, but content areas. And one of those cross-cutting concepts is compare and contrast.
Yes.
We talk about, as in the context of astronauts, aquanauts, how teachers can teach compare and contrast within a science arena.
Yes. So the book you're talking about is Astronaut, Aquanaut, How Space Science and Sea Science Interact. And it's how you take two completely, seemingly, different environments, and then you compare and contrast them. And while you're doing this, kids learn, again, possibly without knowing that they're learning, different things. They learn that astronauts wear one kind of suit and aquanauts wear a different one. And that you can even show the pictures side by side and say, well, what's different? But you can do this with any nonfiction, STEM topic or otherwise. You could just pull 2 books off the shelf, maybe on the same topic, and say, okay, this book is about trees, but here we're talking about trees in a forest and so forth. And these type of trees are going to be trees that might be found near a desert or in a very dry climate. And you can talk about why are the trees different and how do they survive? Like, how does a cactus survive in the desert? And you can compare and contrast with how, maybe a tree in the rainforest survives under all of that moisture. Mm-hmm. And that is a concept that even little kids can understand, comparing and contrasting. And they actually get excited, right? Because they're like, oh, look, we're like I know these things. And they're different from what you know. So it just opens up the curiosity, I think.
It's awesome. Well, and that leads into another question about these nonfiction books. What do you think about the idea of STEAM teachers moving away from textbook style teaching?
I love it. Clearly, the textbooks have their place, okay? Because we know that you guys are required to teach to standards and the kids have to learn certain things to advance to the next level, that they have to understand certain concepts to build upon. And that is true about science. Like, it would be hard for me to walk into, say, a kindergarten class and teach them about Newton's laws of motion if they didn't really even understand what a force is, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a purpose to the textbooks. But what I think you can do is augment that with something that's a little more exciting for kids in using STEAM books. And you can show them, you can kind of do a deeper dive, like my astronaut aquanaut book. Like, okay, we're learning about atmosphere and we're learning about buoyancy, but we're doing it as an aquanaut or as an astronaut, mm-hmm. right? So that kind of like brings the curriculum alive, and it also gives the teacher something to hold on to. Like, instead of just reading it out of the textbook, it gets you excited because you're like, oh, look, I'm going to split my class. Half you guys are aquanauts, half of you are astronauts. How are we going to live? What are you going to do? And then you get to teach all the concepts you need to teach, but you're having fun, which means they're probably having fun.
That's right. First there was STEAM, and then there was STEM, and then there was STEAM, and then there was STREAM. And then there was STEAM-IDO, QRLMNOP. No one wants to be left out.
Yes.
But what is the big idea of STEM, in your opinion? What is that big thing that everyone needs to understand, no matter what letters are attached?
So what I think STEM is I think it's teaching problem solving and critical thinking. And that is if you follow me at all, that's my big platform. And critical thinking and problem solving transcends STEM. You can say whatever you want, but, we as adults, just adults, know we all have to do critical thinking and problem solving. And I think the easiest way to teach kids about that, I mean, yes, I'm probably biased, but the easiest way is to show them STEM and STEAM as it's happening through the eyes of a scientist or an engineer, because they have to use all of these skills. Mm-hmm. And when you can get kids to do experiments, that's even more cool, right? Because they have to solve their own problems and do their own critical thinking.
Well, and that's one of the things I really adore about your books. It seemed to not matter, the book, Beastly Bionics, the robot book, everything about robots, and Astronaut Aquanaut that we've been talking about. You give ideas for experiments. So my question for you is do you have a favorite one?
A favorite book or a
favorite experiment?
Favorite experiment.
That
oh
you can
my
talk
gosh. So when everybody asks me to basically pick my favorite book or whatever, it's like asking to pick your favorite child. Mm-hmm. So, probably my favorite experiment book that I've done, there's 2, I'll say 2, are actually, there are experiments in some of the ones we mentioned, but I did a book called Outdoor School, Rocks, Fossils, and Shells. And it is literally about how you take this book outside and hunt for rocks, fossils, and shells. And you can even create your own archaeological dig in your backyard with your parents' permission. You know, so that one. And then I did another book called The Secret Science of Sports. And I grew up with 3 brothers. So I've been playing sports probably since I was 2, since I could walk. And what I did was take sports and break it down into physics. And also we have a whole section on neuroscience, and technology, and that book is filled with activities that you're supposed to do outside. And so those are probably my 2 favorite activity books that I've done.
It's really neat.
What is it like for your children to grow up around someone who's written so many books, who spends so much time researching science and science-related topics? What is that like for your children?
So I will answer for them. My kids are grown now, but I think their lives were filled with science and engineering, and they learned to appreciate it. You know, 2 of them became engineers, and the third one, she understands science, she appreciates science. She actually is more of like an editor, so she's very into writing, and she's very talented at that. But the other thing was, my husband was in the Navy, and he was a nuclear power officer. So I like to tell this. He taught my son how a nuclear reactor worked when he was 8. So that's kind of our life. Every family trip we go on, we go to a science museum, we see something sciencey. That's our life. Do they appreciate it? I hope so. I think they've enjoyed it.
Of course they do.
Yeah.
Of course they have. That's so awesome. Because what tips do you have for parents who are looking for those easy ways to build curiosity in kids?
Encourage them to ask you questions, which I know because it can be kind of tiring sometimes, but encourage them to notice the world around them and then tell them to look it up. Because right now, a lot of kids these days want the answer, right? They'll come to the teachers and they'll say, okay. I mean, because I get this from some of my students, and they're like, okay, I want to know the actual answer to this problem. And I was like, well, there could be like 3 or 4. And that kind of freaks them out, right? Mm-hmm. But tell them that it's okay. Like, this is not a test. There's not a right or wrong. Allow them to explore. You know, it was funny. We were I was in London with my daughter and my husband pre-pandemic, and we had 2 days, and we were like, what are we going to do? And my daughter, on her own, looked up and found out that CERN, the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, Geneva, was open for tours. That was my daughter. Now, she told me, and I was like, oh my God, we're going. But she was like, we should go there. So, once you're over there, it's cheaper to go somewhere else, right? So we went and we toured CERN above ground for 2 days, or for 1 day. And it was the coolest thing ever. And so, but I was also proud that my daughter picked that, right? We could have gone anywhere. We were like, we could go to Paris. She's like, no, let's go to Switzerland. I said, okay. Mm-hmm. So encourage kids to do that, to be okay with picking the places where you want to go and being curious.
I think that's one of the neater things I've learned from you just listening today is to follow your curiosity. Yes. And here you talk about your children's interesting too, because that's one of the things that Miss Antoniak and I, my science teacher I mentioned, we're talking about when we're talking about your books. Your books are really neat, and maybe this is a nonfiction thing. Maybe it is, or maybe it is unique to you. They can be picked up by children of just about any age.
Yes.
We were looking at your book about solar energy that's definitely written for a younger crowd, and she has a 5-year-old, and she's like, my daughter can pick up this and learn a good bit from it, but I can turn around and give it to my 7th graders, and they can understand solar energy in a way that just the textbook can't do it for them. And I think that's something that, as a language arts teacher, I haven't thought about. Just nonfiction, aging it, I think is how you said it, is really difficult. Like, if we're going to call a nonfiction book middle grade, what does that mean?
Yeah. And that's where, so I tend to write middle grade, which we discussed. I'm not happy about that term because it really starts at 3rd grade and up. But if you look at a lot of my books, they're written for about fifth grade level, fourth, fifth grade, which is kind of like the universal age where a lot of people can understand it. And I have adults that read my books, not for their kids, for themselves, and email me and ask me questions. In fact, it was really funny. For the World War II, The Spies, Lies, Disguise book, I actually got an email from an adult whose father loved my book so much. For his birthday, he wanted me to, like, autograph the book. He, like, sent me a book. I autographed it for his father and then sent it to him. And I was like, how old? He was, like, in his 60s. And I was like, wow, you really love my kid's book. But that, to me, fifth grade, that's what I try to do, because I think it's the best age where you have just enough science to understand some of the more in-depth topics I'm covering. And hopefully your curiosity is still peaked at that age.
We talk about gateway authors, authors who have written books for a span of age levels, people like Jennifer Holm and Kwame Alexander and Jason Reynolds, so that if we get them hooked early, then the kid can grow with the book. And in so many ways, you are a gateway author for nonfiction, that we can give your name to a kid and they can grow with your name. And from a teacher perspective, an educator perspective, you have no idea how powerful that is in our hands for our kids.
Well, that's great. Thank you. And that's what I hope to do. I mean, I hope to inspire science for kids of all ages, and I actually say that a lot when I do my talks. And while I don't always write picture books, I did tell you I have a picture book coming out this June called Footprints Across the Planet. But it's not where I live, so to speak, right? Like that. Every once in a while, we as authors are like, oh my gosh, I have to tell this story, and this is the only way. And I was actually rather surprised it came out as a picture book. But yeah, I mean, I'm fully comfortable writing for older kids. I have a book on climate change for kind of like high schoolers, and that one was amazing to write. And it's so much fun to talk that topic with older kids, because you can get into the, as we were saying before, like, how do we fix it? Like, as in, how much does it cost? So let's get into the economics and all of these kinds of things that you can't do when you're talking with the younger kids. So I love being able to span that. So I'm honored that you would call me that. That's great. Thank you.
I don't give out praise easily. I mean it.
Well, one of the things we love to ask on Next Book is, what are you reading? What do you like to read? And that may lend itself, since you are a writer, we have to ask too, what are you working on next? You've mentioned your picture book that's coming out this year. So what's on the horizon?
So let me answer the question first. So if I get to choose what I read, I actually read those little cozy murder mysteries.
Woohoo! Love it.
Yes.
If they're British, extra points.
Amen. I watch those all the time, the little British murder mysteries, but I choose the ones where, people solve murder mysteries and bake cookies on the side. So I love mysteries, but it's really funny because if you think about it, that's what science is, right? Solving mystery. So what am I working on now? I actually signed a contract. I'm working on with the co-author, Cynthia Levinson. And she's the author of Fault Lines in the Constitution. So she's, a really big name nonfiction author. We're working on a book called Who Owns the Moon?
Oh.
Because as we are approaching, getting ready to launch the SLS rocket with NASA to head to the moon, and of course, SpaceX is on its way. The big question is if we build a settlement there, who's in charge? So this is remember how I told you I like to do books that are happening now so that kids look for the future? That's what this book is. And then I have another book coming out next year. It's a book about it's about the Amazon, and now I forget the name of the title. It's not called Saving the Amazon. It's anyway, it's about it's in conjunction with the Field Museum of Chicago, which is so cool because I went there as a kid all the time. And they have what's called a rapid inventory project, where a team of scientists goes down into usually Central or South America, and they help figure out how to restore whether or not areas in these in the Amazon should be saved. and they've saved a huge amount of land there with, of course, with the government help and all this kind of stuff. But it's a really amazingly diverse team of scientists that tramp through these places that, you know, humans have rarely been, walking through swamps, grabbing snakes with their bare hands, like, and, you know, the coolest thing is a lot of them are from Colombia or from South America, and also women. So
Wow.
that's an amazing book. So look for that one from Charles Bridge. I mean, I think 2023, I don't know, with the pandemic, you know, all these books are getting shifted.
Awesome.
It was a pleasure to meet you. You really are inspiring. And Who Owns the Moon? You talked about titles hooking. That's a great title.
That is a great title. I will say that was not my title. Cynthia came up with that. But yes, that was a fabulous title. And thank you so much. It was so wonderful meeting you guys. It was so exciting to be with such amazing teachers, especially after being the pandemic. So this is my first time back at a workshop, and you made me feel just like home.
We're so
you very
glad you
much.
could join us. Thanks for being on Next Book.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
All right, so like we mentioned throughout the episode, everything that we've talked about, all of the books that we mentioned today, all of our suggestions can all be found on our website and through the Wakelet that we share with you guys. Michelle and I would love to hear what you are reading now and what you're reading next. So leave us a comment and let us know what you're reading, and let us know what you'd like to hear us talk about. See y'all later.